Welcome in FFU. I guess I need my hashtag going, but this is the fantasy football universe. I am SC Romero here with two wonderful gentlemen, Jeremy Sobin and my man Jesse Moeller. Gentlemen, how's it going?
It's going, man. I don't know if I totally fit into my shirt that I fit into a couple months ago, but the holidays happened. Here we are. But we are, as the Brits like to say, suited and booted, ready for the award show.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, I was looking for all my ties. They have been taken down somewhere and I could not find them. So I was like, I don't have a single tie in the house. I was like, so this is a semi-casual affair for myself. But we're doing good. I'm looking forward to
stylish.
It's going
stylish,
to be a fun time. Yeah, absolutely, right? This is the most stylish we'll get all year. So, prepare yourselves for it.
I'm making sure we're getting the tweets out and everything. I'm glad y'all feel that way because I feel the exact same way. I wore this, I think, last year or something, and I was like, this definitely fit differently last year. So the New Year's resolutions hasn't kicked in yet, right? So time will come. But everyone that's joining, thank you for joining us today. As we mentioned, we are the fantasy football universe, and like every universe, or I guess country, I guess, Miss America, all that kind of stuff. But there's an award show, and with the fantasy football season being officially done, because we are into playoffs, some games happening today. We want to give our own awards and talk about who really shined in certain moments. We have awards from the quarterback of the year to the bust of the year to the best single game performance, all these different things going on that we just want to talk about. And we have some polls going on too. And we'll bring those up on who the fans thought, and we can really go from there. But this is exciting. No, we're not giving out actual awards to these guys. That would be cool. Maybe one day we reach out to some like, hey, whoever, Tom Brady, you got an award from the FFU, right? One day down the line. But with that, we want to get in and just talk about some of our favorite guys. Jamie, what's up, man? Glad you could join, and hope you're joining along with this fun on this ride on the awards ceremony. But let's get into it. For our first topic, it was the quarterback of the year, and the nominees are Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow. Just four fantastic quarterbacks. We each kind of voted for our own as well. Jerry, I'll start with you. Who really shines you to be brought up as the nominee for quarterback of the year?
Yeah, it was a 2-horse race for me. I love the guys listed on the bottom, Baker and Joe. And they've developed, certainly Baker Mayfield, more than everyone else developed this year as kind of a top tier guy and playing out of his mind. But the guys on the top, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, these are the guys who are in the conversation for MVP, certainly. And Josh Allen beating two of the better teams or best teams really in football. Lamar Jackson putting up insane stats in his what should be a third MVP season based on stats alone. But I guess we'll have to see how it happens because Josh has the case. But I went with Lamar Jackson for QB of the year simply because, like I said, the most touchdowns of his career passing, the third most rushing yards of his career. And I think it was the second fewest or third fewest interceptions as well for him. So Lamar, by all accounts, had his best statistical season. And we know he's already won 2 MVPs, carrying his team with a strong chance to make the Super Bowl. He's got a long line to get through in terms of going through Kansas City and playing Buffalo perhaps. But, Lamar Jackson for me is my fantasy quarterback of the year.
Jesse, any thoughts on that as well? Just Lamar quarterback of the year?
It's pretty unanimous if you want to go from the guy that was the best throughout the season. Now you can use Fantasy Pros. The problem is they're dinging Josh Allen week 18. They're giving him a 0. So, I'm not counting that game. Even if you don't count that game, he's at 24 points per game. Lamar's the only guy to clear 25. So, he gave you a clear leg up. And then we get down to, Burrow and Mayfield. Those are at 22. So, it all lines up from if you were starting one player, the way I look at it, for my MVP, if I want to play one player to win on week, anyway, it's Lamar. Because, he's got the highest floor. The ceiling's out of control. You're getting an average of 25 points a game. And he had a couple of just monster performances where he went 30-plus multiple times this year. So, for me, it's Lamar. But all these guys are deserving, and if you had them, if you've got Baker super cheap, or if you got Joe on the discount because of his wrist, you were loving life this year because they gave you a chance to win, and that's what it's all about. But yeah, that's a long-winded way of me saying that it's Lamar Jackson and then everyone else this year for fantasy quarterback for me.
Before I give away, Jamie says he has his reward show on Tuesday. Jamie, go ahead and drop your link on here so we can make sure people are following and tuning in.
Yes,
and yeah,
please.
share your thoughts as
We
well,
can tune
man.
in.
We always appreciate you joining in and commenting for us. But I actually went with Joe Burrow here. It reason being, like, get Lamar. I understand what he's doing. Lamar's every time. But Joe Burrow, I mean, as far as yards, he had close to 5,000 yards, 49-18, 43 touchdowns. I'm pretty sure that led as well. With only where's the interception? 9 interceptions there. I think he just had a phenomenal season. And chances are you were taking Lamar at the QB1, if not QB2. There you go. Going for 2 live. Make sure you are following that for our guy Jamie, so y'all can see his reward show on Tuesday. But for it, I think you just took him a little bit later. He could have went anywhere from like QB5 to QB10. So I think that could have been something happening for him. I think he just had a stellar year. A lot of that comes down to his receiving core. Now the question can be, Lamar had that. Does Lamar throw for 6,000 yards? Because if he has, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins out there as well. I went with that. I know Baker. He's a great candidate as well. And Josh Allen, I know you talk about the comparison between him and Lamar. Josh Allen doesn't have as much help for him. So it could have been argued that he won the actual full thing, and was the guy there for him. But we, like you said, Lamar, him, I chose Burrow. We had Baker, we had Josh Allen on there. We actually put the polls up on X, and we had some fans vote in as well for QB of the year. Surprisingly enough, they also say Lamar Jackson. 41% of people voted for Lamar Jackson. But Joe Burrow was number 2 with 31%. Then Josh Allen at 22%, and then Baker Mayfield at 6%. But for the fantasy football universe, our winner is, I guess we'll give a drum roll, just QB of the year, Lamar Jackson. And I think it hit it with what Jeremy was saying. First season over 4,000 yards passing. The question was, is he a quarterback or a running back? Well, he had over 4,000 yards. And you brought up his, I think, second lowest, you said, on interceptions. This is actually his career best in touchdowns to interception ratio. For every 10 touchdowns, he threw 1 interception. And he had, 41 passing touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, also 4 rushing TDs. Pretty damn good for a running back, if you ask me. But that's
yeah,
really. I mean, do y'all have anything about him just being QB of the year that really is it a surprise to y'all that he's the QB of the year?
No, it's definitely not a surprise. But just real quick, give me a metric, right? Make it yards per attempt first. Make it passer rating first. Make it, what do I have? Another one, which is here. No, it's gone. But there's multiple metrics where Lamar Jackson is number 1 in the league, in the entire NFL, and in some of them by a wide margin. And he ran for damn near 1,000 yards once again this season. So he's absolutely crushed it. No, there's no doubt in my mind he's the guy.
Yeah, he also won the QBR. When you're winning the passer rating and the QBR awards, they're designed for passers. And Lamar's like, hey, I'm a rusher, but I'm gonna take that. So we can finally squash the bet of him not being this elite guy. He was the best quarterback in the NFL this season. So yeah, it's really hard to argue against Lamar, man. He was fantastic.
I saw something the other day on X. It was when Trent Dilfer took the Ravens to the Super Bowl, he was 28. When Joe Flacco took the Ravens to the Super Bowl, he was 28. Guess how old Lamar Jackson is this year?
It's in the cards. Let's do it.
Possibly after their Super Bowl. I mean, I think for him, we all want that because I think it just, even with the MVPs, it just silenced all the haters, right? To say he's the guy there. So I think if he wins that Super Bowl, that's the only thing. As bad as this, if he does it with a Super Bowl, it's always that chance that maybe he doesn't get in the Hall of Fame. Regardless, he already has a Hall of Fame type of career. But having that Super Bowl kind of solidifies it regardless of the MVP. So we're definitely cheering for that. But, we talked about him being called a running back because of his rushing abilities. I mean, Jeremy, you hit it almost 1,000 yards rushing this year. Let's segue into our second award here, our running backs of the year. And the nominees are, for the running backs, as y'all know, Saquon Barkley, phenomenal season. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and the king himself, Derrick Henry, as the running back of the year nominees. Jesse, let's start with you this time. Who to you is it, or who really stands out to you here?
I mean, it's Saquon Barkley. He really did not have any bad games. I think he had 1 game or maybe 2 games under 10 points, if that's that. But what he did compared to the rest of the league, similar to Lamar Jackson, if you go points per game, he's at over 22. And this is including the one of week 6 and week 15, where he went under 10 points. Outside of that, he was still head and shoulders above everyone else. Lamar was Derrick Henry was right there with him, but he, edged him out in the playoffs. So whatever way you look at it, if you want to go fantasy war, which is a great tool, Saquon Barkley's over 5. And he's the only player in the NFL to go over 5 fantasy war this season, which shows you how impactful he was to your lineups. Because when you put him in, he just gave you massive advantage over everybody else. Because you say you're starting Saquon against like James Conner or something, that's almost like 10 points a week or something. So what he did for you single-handedly carried you to the playoffs. I think 51% of teams with Saquon either like made the finals, just some ridiculous number this year because we got him in a little bit of discount. So yeah, for me, it's Saquon and kind of everyone else. I think you can make the case for Jameer to do the playoffs or Henry if you like those guys, but yeah, it's Saquon.
Jerry, anybody on there that you want to talk about specifically when it comes to running back nominees?
No, I mean, these are all great options, but you got to go Saquon Barkley. I mean, just a phenomenal season from him. 345 attempts, which I believe led the league. It did, more than Derrick Henry, more than Kyron Williams. These guys are severe workhorses. 2,000 yards, of course. Guess how many fumbles Saquon Barkley had on the year? Just 2. I mean, that's ridiculous for 345 carries. And then the work that he got through the air additionally. So the touches are insane. He's super secure, super safe, both for the team and for your fantasy team. He was an absolute stud, the RB1.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about Gibbs and, Bijan. For them being up here, I think that's just a testament of who they are. They have high value. To be honest, I can argue that they have higher value than Saquon and even Derrick Henry, right? So those are definitely 2 targets. The King, he had a great year. That's not undercoat that. 1,900 yards rushing, 193 yards receiving, 19 receptions, 16 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. The difference is Saquon was just a little bit better. Over 2,000 rushing yards, over 270 receiving yards, over 30 receptions, 13 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. So a tad bit better here and there. And we can't forget, one of the plays of the year when he did leaped over someone backwards. That was something
crazy.
Turned around and did the leap. Like, what? You don't see that often. So definitely a phenomenal year. And, if you're a Giants fan, you're really hating it because it's just very hard for that to happen when you see something like that happen. And what's even more, bad is the Giants are keeping their GM, where his son told him draft Jaden Daniels. His son said, we gotta keep Saquon, and he's like, we'll have you test the market. Will you come back with us? And Saquon's like, I'm probably not, bro, but sure. So just some heavy things there for him. Perfect. And then, so let's go with the Twitter fans. Fans voted RB of the year. Surprise, surprise. Saquon Barkley, 72%. That was a bigger, almost unanimous there, over Lamar. But Jamar Gibbs was actually second to the fans with 16%. Yeah. Then Derrick Henry at 10% and Bijan with 2%. Hey, if you could trade Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley for Bijan, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yes, please. Yes, please.
I will say, when it comes to the FFU, this is the only award that we were completely unanimous on. Yeah. And we voted for the new king, I should say, running back of the year, Saquon Barkley. We talked about a lot of this stuff here: 5.81 yards per carry, 2005 rushing yards, 43 targets, 33 receptions. I mean, just all around dominant performance from him. He probably did take you to the playoffs. Did he help you win it? That's a different discussion. But he probably definitely did take you there. And I mean, you're just stoked if you had him, especially if you bought into him before he got traded to Eagles. I mean, you're just doing black flips everywhere right now for him. So let's see here. Jamie, I saw Jamie did. Barkley is Mr. Consistency Award, the player who delivered reliable points. Yeah, I like that. That's very good. It is definitely a phenomenal one.
If you're going like basically the guillotine award where it's like consistent week to week, Jameer Gibbs is the only guy in the NFL that was over double-digit points every game this season. So I would say he's technically the consistency award winner, but yeah, Saquon had the ceiling. So yeah, no arguments.
I think there was a slight point in time when you saw Montgomery getting a lot of the touchdowns where you could have maybe traded for Gibbs because someone probably got worried. I don't think at all during the time was anyone trying to trade Barkley unless they were just like tanking and they're like he's hurting my team at this point, right? So chances are they still didn't trade him though either. So there it is.
Too good, man.
But moving on from the positions, next we talked about the quarterback, running back. Now we're gonna go into the wide receiver of the year, and our nominees are a bunch of LSU guys looking at it, but Jamar Chase, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Terry McLaurin. Jeremy, who stands out to you here?
Yeah, I mean, these are some great wide receivers, like you said, LSU. Times 3, and then Ohio State. We're okay. But, Brian Thomas Jr. for me was my pick. I know he wasn't the wide receiver one like Jamar Chase. I know he wasn't the rookie wide receiver one like I believe Malik Neighbors is. Just, a much worse situation, which is hard to be a much worse situation than Jacksonville, but the Giants pulled it off. And Terry McLaurin, a great season. But Brian Thomas Jr. for me, when you talk about the metric that we love for wide receivers, the yards per route run, Brian Thomas Jr. was 11th in the league in that statistic among all pass catchers. As a rookie, he was 16th in the league in targets. Of course, Wan'Dale Robinson had to be ahead of him, which makes no sense. But he's absolutely crushed every single metric for a receiver that you want to see. I'd say Jamar Chase did similarly for fantasy for sure, but Brian Thomas Jr. was the ultimate value. Jamar Chase was in the first round. Malik Neighbors was the first rookie wide receiver off the board or second, usually in the second or third round. Brian Thomas Jr. was this afterthought, and he really just came in and put up studly numbers, more so than Terry McLaurin. And of course, at a much better value as well.
Jesse, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm with you. If you're talking about value, it's really hard to beat the value because you're getting Brian Thomas Jr. at pick 118. Wide receiver 48, like before the season. And people were terrified of him because they viewed him as this like upside prospect. He was going right around Jameson Williams and all these guys. Yeah, like Jeremy, and me and SC were like, nah, just draft this dude. He's that good, right? Because we love the tools and everything that he had, and then like the turbo. He was the deal. But if we're talking about the guy that separated himself, there's no better advantage you had than starting Jamar Chase weekly. Like I know we talked about Lamar. Jamar Chase had the big advantage over anybody else's position. It's if we go over WAR, it's over a half a point better than the next player. He's the only position that happens. Not tight end, not quarterback, not running back. It's wide receiver. It's Jamar Chase because he had multiple boom games that Jamie's talking about where he absolutely just went off. And we'll talk about him going off later in the best game of the season because he's a nominee in that one as well. No surprise. But just what he did, he was on a record-setting pace this year. He had 175 targets, 1,700 yards. Oh, yeah, no big deal. 17 touchdowns. And that's really the true differentiator. Because Brian Thomas Jr. had touchdowns, but didn't have near the amount of yards, right? So Brian Thomas Jr. is coming. He's not going to hit that number anytime soon, but he's going to get his way up there. It's just Jamar Chase is already there. He's still young. What is he, 24 years old? Yeah, he's only 24 years old. So he's going to be here for the next at minimum 6 years, like his life stays healthy. So if you have Jamar Chase on your team, like what you had, the difference maker is there. And it's just, he's the one guy when you look at the like Neighbors, his quarterback sucks. Terry McLaurin, he's got Jaden Daniels. Brian Thomas Jr. has, Trevor Lawrence, but it's the difference when you have Joe Burrow throwing you the ball. Those two are just, they're telepathically connected, and it's going to be a light show for a long time for those two. So it's a long-winded way of saying, Jamar Chase, everybody else.
All right. Yeah, I actually, I agree with that too. You have to bring up the Triple Crown, right? Then he win that this year too. We're only cup did that, so definitely a great season. I said Terry McLaurin, just for the season he had, best season overall in his career. A lot has to do with Jay Daniels just trusting him deep. Has 13 touchdowns, career high. His targets aren't there. His receptions though, second best in his career with 82, 1,096 yards. And you did bring up, Brian Thomas was going at wide receiver 48 or so. McLaurin was wide receiver 38, still finished in the top 6. So you definitely got a good value there. And that was a lot of my argument. I'm thinking about some of these guys. It's like Jamar Chase, we were taking him as the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, right? It was him or Jets who you're taking. So that's where I would argue where, you got better value with Brian Thomas or Terry McLaurin. The best thing is with Terry McLaurin, I think for me is we've been waiting for this. Like we knew he was good. We knew he could stretch the field. We knew he was a strong pass catcher as well. We just hadn't seen it. His best year came 2 years ago when he was wide receiver 14 overall, and he had 1,191 yards, only 5 touchdowns. This year he doubled that. So I was very stoked to have him. If you did have him on your teams, fantastic. Luckily for me, we'll talk about it later. Someone brought up, traded for him in the championship week against me, and didn't work out as well. So this is just something really great where I thought he definitely came out and dominated. And, you were happy with him this season. This was something you were kind of worried if you traded for him in the offseason. It was kind of like a buy low, but now you can probably sell high on him for it. So,
Yep.
Speaking about the wide receivers, though, as we mentioned, the fans got to vote too. Surprise, surprise, even more than Saquon Barkley. Jamar Chase is the unanimous one here. Not unanimous, but 81% said Jamar Chase. 12% said Brian Thomas Jr., Terry McLaurin 5%, and 2% said Malik Neighbors. Now, we're not dogging on Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is a dog himself, great, but these other guys just did have a little bit better seasons when you think about where they're at and stuff like that. Neighbors also, though, was hurt. He did miss 2 or 3 games, so that definitely played an impact. But for the FFU, there is only one, and the wide receiver of the year is, y'all get it, Jamar Chase, right? I mean, 127 receptions, 175 targets, 1,708 yards, and 17 touchdowns. Just absolutely a menace. I mean, he's not going anywhere. T. Higgins may need to go somewhere, but Jamar Chase isn't going nowhere. Him and Joe Burrow have that solid connection, and that's what they're going to be doing there as well.
SC, I'm just looking up real quick on the all-time receptions leader for a season.
Mm-hmm.
And where did he finish? 9th.
It's close.
9th all-time
Yeah.
for receptions. So Jamar Chase absolutely crushed.
I'm curious, whatever sheet you're looking at, does it show the targets they had too?
It doesn't, but I can look that up. Give me
There's
a moment.
There's a season where a guy got like 200 targets. It's like Marvin Harrison Jr. One of those guys, like the Peyton Manning seasons. There's a couple that are like CD had like 190 last year almost. Like there's a few guys that had a little bit more, but yeah, this is an all-time season from Jamar Chase. No doubt about it.
And this was the one.
I don't have targets, unfortunately.
And the good thing is, like, we see the player like Tyreek Hill put up 700 yards, 1,700 consistently. So it's possible for him to do it again, especially if they bring back Higgins. The benefit of Higgins, he could take some eyes off of Chase, right? He can continue to go out there and dominate too. So they can't just focus on Jamar Chase because T. Higgins could break out a big one as well. We saw it throughout the fantasy season. So they just have a very solid team. Even with Chase Brown, they don't need to adjust their running back, so to say. They have Chase Brown. So it is pretty good just to see that. I mean, I think, he can actually say to Big Bro, like, hey, I'm the wide receiver 1 right now, right? He doesn't have to go to the Jets anymore. I will say some honorable mentions: Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They had great seasons as well. We just thought these guys did a little bit more, when it came to actually breaking it down week after week as well. But moving on, our last positional one is going to be our tight end of the year. And those nominees are Trey McBride, Jonnu Smith, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers. Jesse, we'll start with you. Who really stood out to you this year?
I mean, it's the big dog. It's Mr. WWE Mania Man himself, George Kittle. You don't want to get in a fight with this guy. This guy is a wild man, and he lives for football. Like, you watch this guy play, there's a reason why he's my favorite player to watch, because this guy feeds off of football and he enjoys life. Oh yeah, and by the way, it's not just vibes. He was the leader, tight end 1 this year. I know we all love Brock Bowers and everything he did. The difference is George Kittle got touchdowns this year, and that's what happened. So because he was such a focal point in that offense, he's been this guy for the past decade. Like, Kittle's just been an incredible kind of under the radar player. I love what Trey McBride did. He was my tight end 1. Jonnu Smith was the waiver wire added tight end. He was fantastic. Brock Bowers just set the rookie receptions record. Like, no big deal. Just hum-ho stuff. But George Kittle, when it came down to it, he was the most consistent, most impactful fantasy player. Even though he missed a few games, it did not matter. He was by far the best tight end. So for me, it's George Kittle, man. I guess just enough said.
Jeremy?
Yeah. George Kittle, absolutely phenomenal season, but Jesse mentioned it. Brock Bowers is the guy for me. He had the most out of nowhere phenomenal season. With most of these guys, I'm looking at value, and Brock Bowers was, valued by many, including myself, lower than even Kyle Pitts this season in redraft. Absolute massive miss and mistake in his first season. I think we all knew he was a generational talent. The question was he going to be able to thrive in year 1? The answer should have been obvious. It wasn't. And Brock Bowers absolutely made people like me eat crow because he absolutely crushed. Eat crow is a statement from like the 1930s, I think. So, I don't know if I've ever used that, but here we are on the award show. But look, Bowers, an absolute menace, an absolute monster, leading all receivers, tight ends and receivers as a rookie in receptions. Absolutely crushing. I think Jesse was a third that you mentioned in the league, fourth in the league, maybe in receptions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was right up there. So Brock Bowers crushed and even played in week 17, which some of these other guys didn't. So he padded his stats a little bit more at the end of the season there. So Brock Bowers absolutely crushed for your fantasy team, crushed you if you faced him.
Just incredible seed from him. He was top 8 in yards. He was freaking third in receptions, and he was 6th in targets. So, yeah, Brock Bowers is letting you know, like, hey, get me a quarterback. Like, I love the vibes from Minshew and all that fun stuff. Like, they're great, but he's not quality NFL quarterback. Aiden O'Connell, we could talk about Rod Favre another time. Like, Brady's there. Go find yourself a quarterback. Bring in Ben Johnson because he's interviewing there. Then Brock Bowers is like, he's taking over tight end 1. So, like, if we make that happen, this time next year, we can talk about Brock Bowers pushing 18 points a game, something crazy. Just like,
This time next year, we talk about Desmond Ridder as QB1 also with Bowers.
Oh,
just kidding. Don't take that serious. I get the argument for Bowers. I think a lot of us were scared because we thought Kyle Pitts was this next generational guy, and Kyle Pitts is just flopped, right? But then you see Bowers coming in. It's like, oh, this is happening, and Bowers is actually making it happen. I mean, y'all brought up a lot of good points. Trey McBride, fantastic season as well for him. But I had to go with Jonnu Smith, man. Jonnu Smith, 1, you probably didn't draft him. 2, he was probably a waiver acquisition for you. 3, he wasn't even in the top 40. He was 41 for tight ends overall ADP. And he finished as tight end 4, on the season. Just a phenomenal season, 884 yards, 8 receiving touchdowns, 88 receptions. Just did some great things, So in that eyes, like, you probably got him as a streaming tight end, but he probably became your tight end 1 overall. He in some weeks you put him over Kelsey, Andrews, Laporta, all these guys that you probably had. You're like, oh, I got this. I'm just gonna pick up Jonnu because I know Waddle's been hurt. Maybe he'll get it. Well, guess what? If you did that, phenomenal. That's the guy that you chose. So he was someone great to go out there and dominate for you. Late first, I agree with this. Late first to mid second, tight end premium. I can see him going.
Yeah.
So
early. It's the nice thing is, like, there was those elite tight ends. Like, we had Kittle, we had Bowers, we had John come on. They're like, and I'm the dumbass that cut Jonnu Smith in the dynasty league before the season because I was trying to make. I had like 5 tight ends. I was like, I don't need Jonnu Smith. He's going to Miami. What's he gonna be there behind Odell Beckham? Yeah, I was that dumbass. So yeah, I'm gonna eat some crow myself too. So me and Jeremy are getting old. We're eating crow. It's fun times.
Eating that crow. And I cut Jonnu too, but thankfully people left him alone on the wire. I picked him back up like another month or 2 later.
Best thing about the home leagues is they don't pay attention to those little things, right? And you could try to tell them, but they're like, you're trying to trick me. It's like, I'm trying to help you, but if you don't want to do it, I'm telling you, because if you don't, I'm gonna put in that waiver bid, So that's how it kind of works. The fans voted for this. Brock Bowers, heavily targeted, 72% said Brock Bowers. Trey McBride was number 2 with 17%. Then George Kittle at 19%, and Jonnu Smith with 2%. For the fantasy football universe, it's whoever votes unanimous, right? We have 4 people in the unanimous vote. Tight end of the year, though, does come down to our guy Jesse's George Kittle. Championship bout himself. I'm a fan of him. I know Aaron is. He goes to WWE events. If football allowed people to get suplex, I'm pretty sure he would suplex some defenders too, right? He would take him to suplex city and do all that kind of stuff. But I think what shines about him, with difference with Bowers, we knew Bowers was kind of the only target, right? We knew that's really all they had. Even the running, Madison, Zamir White, Jacoby, like Bowers was the guy going in. Trey McBride, we knew Marvin Harrison was a deal, but we also knew McBride was, if not 1B, just the 1A. He was definitely involved there as well. You bring up what else am I saying? Jonnu Smith, that was kind of, like I said, just under the radar kind of tight end. With Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, that injury happened. Deebo Samuel, CMC, injuries happen, but one thing stayed consistent, and that was George Kittle being there for his quarterback and his team. Just a phenomenal year for him. And best part is, out of the guys you mentioned, Kittle may be the lowest because he's one of the older guys, right? When you talk about dynasty perspective. So you could potentially go out there and get some George Kittle and, trade him for a Jonnu Smith. I would do that because it's more consistent, right? So if you could try to fix some things like that, I think that would be fantastic. But yeah, what anything, Jared, I know that was your guy, Jesse. Anything else you want to add on Kittle?
Yeah, I mean, people forget he led the league in yak back in 2018. Like, he's that explosive playmaker at tight end. I get it, he's older, but you watch him and he's just like a freak. He dominates basically in blocking and in route running. He's the do-it-all tight end we want in today's NFL. And now he's dealt with a ton of injuries. And to your point, he went 2 picks behind the bust at tight end of the year we can get into, Dalton Kincaid. So Dalton Kincaid went 2 picks before George Kittle. Some people are like, I was on the Kincaid train. I did not work out, obviously, but imagine like you get sniped on Kincaid. You're like, I guess I'll settle for Kittle. Oh, yeah, you get the tight end one. This is how it goes with fantasy sometimes, right? There's a lot we don't know and can't predict. You just got to bet on talent when it comes down to it. Like we see Bowers, an incredibly talented player in what we thought was a bad situation. Kittle, what we thought was a crowded situation. These 2 guys rose to the top because they're 2 of the best tight ends in the league. So sometimes you just got to bet on talent, man. It usually works out for you.
Great transition, though, because speaking on betting on talent, that means being ahead of your league, meaning being aware of what the waivers are and how you can get into that, right? So we have our best waiver edition this year, and the nominees are Bucky Irvin, Jacoby Myers, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Jalen McMillan. McMillan, excuse me. Jeremy, who's your best waiver ad?
Yeah, we could also, honorably mention Jonnu Smith, who we already talked about. So we're not going to go back into there, but that man was sitting on waivers. And if you picked him up, he helped a ton. I'm going Jalen McMillan here. I know he didn't turn it on until much later, but he turned it on in the fantasy playoffs. And in fact, he first went off in week 14 against the Vegas Raiders, 4 receptions, 59 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then he was the massively, recommended number 1 waiver ad of that week. And if you were successfully added him and you had to spot start him in the playoffs in the wild card round, well, forget it. All he did in the fantasy playoffs was absolutely crush. I don't have the exact number, but I think he's certainly a number 1 wide receiver. He's top 12. I think he's closer to wide receiver 6 or 7 over that span. But here's what he did in the fantasy playoffs for you. 5 for 75 and a touchdown in week 15, 5 for 57 and a touchdown in week 16. And then the championship round for you when you needed him most, 5 for 51 and 2 more scores. So in the fantasy playoffs, 4 touchdowns, 185-ish yards. Absolutely crushed for you. So for me, it was Jalen McMillan because he turned it on when you needed him most.
And I think we'll stay on the Buck train here because I know your guy too, Jesse. Why don't you go ahead and talk about our guy, the Oregon Duck, the Buck.
Yeah,
these
2. I'm still having some serious PTSD from my fading of my RB1, Bucky Irving. But if you'll remember, after week 2, Bucky Irving put up 2.2 fantasy points that game. People were like, "Oh crap, it's not happening." It's Rachaad White show. What happened is he got dropped. He was below 50%. He was the headline on my waiver wire article. We're like, all right, let's get Bucky, get him because you never know how these shake out. Bet on talent. Bucky showed it, man. Like once you saw it hit, you either got it or you were too late because at running back, you know how this happens, right? Once you see it, if you don't already have him rostered, you're a little bit behind. So we got to go fantasy points per game. Bucky was a dog. He was incredible this year. I do want to shout out Jeremy's Jalen McMillan. He averaged 19 points in the playoffs in PPR leagues. That's incredible, dude. That's like elite stuff. He was wide receiver 14 in that time span. So he was legit. Bucky Irving on the whole season, if you include his entire usage, he was still a top 20 running back. So this includes a couple of his bad games, 14 fantasy points per game. Basically, he took over in week 6, it looked like, and he didn't give the job back. Like, he was just that guy throughout. And towards down the stretch, he was just carrying you. After the bye week, 27 again, had a couple 17 performances in there. And then in the championship, to Jeremy's point, 23 points, really just rounding it off. A do-it-all back that just, when you watched him, and yeah, Juwan Jennings was also a consideration of mine too, because I liked what he did. Bucky was just more consistent throughout. I like Tyrone Tracy a lot as well, Jacoby Myers as well. But the ceiling was really Bucky Irving. He was the guy that was putting you above and beyond on a week-to-week basis because the floor is a little bit lower than the rest. So if I'm going for a difference maker, for me, it's Bucky Irving. And still got that PTSD with the whole Bucky stuff. So yeah, we're gonna learn from that lesson. It's a hard one. It's a hard one, folks. But yeah, he's my waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes to attest about what the Buccaneers offense was this season. They just had playmakers all around. And there really was that question, what's going to happen when Godwin goes down? Because McMillan didn't step up crazily when Godwin and Evans were out for a little bit of a time, right? But he did come out. Yeah, so then it did come out, though, where McMillan really stepped up and we saw Bucky as well. And best part was Bucky Irvin did it, on 44% snap share? He had a phenomenal year with that. So it's something where it's like, okay, that looks great for him. I said Jacoby Myers because if you probably didn't draft, I mean, you could have drafted him late, but first 2 weeks he had below 10 fantasy points, and then we started seeing the traction where he had 9 targets, 10 targets, 9 targets. Then he got hurt and missed 2 weeks, so you probably had an opportunity to get him. And then from week 8 on to week 17, he only had 2 more games with under 10 fantasy points. Other than that, though, he had 4 games with double-digit targets. He had over 5 receptions in at least 5 of the games there. He was just someone that was Mr. Consistent for you all the way down, and especially with how deep the wide receivers are, you probably still didn't pick him up until later because you started realizing he probably became really factual to say he finishes a top 20 wide receiver. You miss people like CeeDee Lamb. Okay, you plug in Jacoby Myers. Guess what? He's going in there and doing some great things. You miss people like a Godwin going down. Okay, Jacoby Myers, he steps in, he's coming. All these players that you drafted early above him go in, and then guess what? Jacoby Myers does something with this guy named Brock Bowers that he's sharing targets with, and still looks good. Granted, Brock Bowers had better games than him, but yeah, he was still Mr. Consistent along the way to go out there and make some things happen and make it, just well for you. The best part about it is too, with his I always say this: check out your leagues because name holds value. Some leagues they hear a player's name, Sam Darnold, and it's gross to them. Yet he was a top 10 QB. Jacoby Myers, it might be gross to them. Yet he's a top 20 wide receiver. Even if they draft a wide receiver, they're probably getting a quarterback. Jacoby Myers knows the system, so he may still have some relevancy. You can buy him for a low price if you're looking for a high-end wide receiver too. Go out there and try to trade for him because people may be hesitant on him because he's not your star-studded wide receiver 1. Yes, he can be replaced, but he is just consistent. He is a safety net for quarterbacks that need to come in, especially if you talk about rookies. If they're not going underneath to a Bowers, guess what? They may be stretching the field to Jacoby Myers, so he could have an even better year next year as well. Good.
Oh no, I was looking on our website. Week 7, I'm looking at rostership on Sleeper. 44% rostered Jacoby Myers. So yeah, he was available till halfway through the season, man. So if you got him, you got yourself a quality wide receiver too.
Yeah, drafted. I mean, but the thing is with this, I feel you drafted him late. He wasn't someone you got maybe in the first 8. You probably gone past the first 8 rounds, past the first 10, right? So that's something where it's consider where he came out and dominated for you just to look great, or he went undrafted. So in redraft, I think he went undrafted in majority, but dynasty, he probably got drafted somewhere there. But as you know, the fans voted for it as well. They actually said Bucky Irvin, 82%. That guy goes out there and win it. Tyrone Tracy was number 2 at 8%. Jalen McMillan with 6%. And then you had Jacoby Myers with 4%, which leads us to our waiver wire acquisition. And that is Buck the Duck himself, Mr. Bucky Irvin. See everything here. Jesse, anything? I know this was your guy. So anything else you want to add on it just with what we're seeing on the screen here?
Yeah, I didn't expect him to translate as good as he did. That was my one concern with him coming in the NFL because everyone's faster, they move quicker. It did not matter. Bucky was moving at a different level. That's the thing. When you watch, this is the frustrating thing. We watch Rachaad White play, then you watch Bucky every play. You're like, dude, just give Bucky the ball. Just give him the ball. It took him a long time to do it, but when they finally did, I think in week 17 they basically didn't give Rachaad White any snaps. So they were like, all right, Bucky, it's your job finally. So we were calling for it. And yeah, I mean, you look at the efficiency, missed tackles forced. He was a league leader, just everything you want out of a running back, Bucky Irvin gave you. And it's another guy like Devon Achane last year. It's a small package. We don't care, man. It's small. They're tiny, but they're mighty, man. So just roll with Bucky. He's just an incredible player. So I am excited to see him the next few years with Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan. All these guys running it back next year should be another fun season. I'm curious where do you think he's going to go next year in drafts? That's the one thing I'm curious to see because I wonder how high we are going to be on him going next year.
Yeah, very. I mean, he's round 4. He's currently my dynasty RB8 at the moment. I feel like that's too low. I got Chase Brown ahead of him at 7. I got Kyron ahead of him at 6. But all of these guys, I feel like you could get him. I can't get him above Devon Achane at 5, but I feel like I could get him up to 6. Yeah. And then, in redraft, when you're just talking about one season, who do you want next year? Do you want Kyron Williams or do you want Bucky? Do you want Chase Brown? Do you want Bucky? I mean, those are conversations that we're going to James Cook or Bucky. Those are conversations we're going to be having next year. And if you pick Bucky over all those guys, I can't fault you.
Yeah, I think he's going to be in that round 3, round 4 range. Probably. It sounds like that's still what it's like. Cause there's still some questions, right? People are a little concerned. So It's going to be a good value next year. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be drafting up plenty of Bucky next year to make up for this mistake I made this year.
Just to go on Jamie's comment here, early 12th and a 14. So in the standard like 12 team, that's still even an extra round back there too, right? Or extra 2 rounds back.
Maybe.
So you're probably getting, round 14, round 15 there.
He's wide receiver 53 this season for ADP. So you got that. Jacoby Myers was a steal.
Two things I want to highlight about Bucky is one, the tape doesn't lie. The combine scared me. I was like, this is a horrible score. You go back to and watch his Oregon Ducks film, the contact balance. He has superb contact balance. He knows how to make people miss and slip through defenders. And we saw that this season when he had the ball in his hands. He was just a playmaker that if he's on the field, you have to account for him. The other thing is this part right here where it says 45 receptions, 47 targets. What? He caught 45 of his 47 targets. Just a superb type of year and 397 receiving yards. I mean, just phenomenal going out there and doing that. And I think he didn't have receiving touchdowns, right? I'm pretty sure he didn't have any. And that's where, imagine if he did, what he would do.
Rashad White stole all of them. Yeah, like 7 or 8 receiving touchdowns. Ridiculous. Yeah.
And I will say for this was not including week 18, by the way. So week 18 is a little bit different here because week 18 he had 47 receptions on 52 targets if you add that in there as well. But just a phenomenal year for him doing some great things there. Definitely an asset that you have, and honestly, someone that you could probably pivot off of Kyron and probably get Bucky plus for him, Bucky plus a second or something like that because the name value for Kyron maybe, right? So
yeah. We're looking at missed tackles forced. Bucky was 6th. He's the only guy below 250 carries. He had like 206. All those guys in the top 6 had 250 or plus carries. So on a missed tackles forced per attempt, Bucky was crushing all of those guys. And it didn't matter. Henry, Saquon, he was better than all of those guys per attempt. So he's the efficiency king that Devontae Chen was last year. So we're getting it, baby. Let's go, Buck.
Sure. Phenomenal year from him. Just a great year for the Buccaneers in general. A lot of times, though, some players have some bad seasons or some teams have some bad seasons, which means it's comeback season. So our next award actually goes to the comeback award, and we actually have 2 guys on here. And that's going to be Sam Darnold and Joe Burrow, 2 quarterbacks who had remarkable seasons this year. Both only played 10 games last season. Let's start with you, Jeremy. Who's your candidate here?
Yeah, I mean, if you've been listening to the show at all, my guy has to be Sam Darnold. I just cannot stop talking about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's best career finish in fantasy football before this season. Anyone want to take a guess? QB what?
It was brutal, like QB 22 or something.
It was even worse than that. It was his first season in the league. He was QB 25. But this is a guy who's come back from seeing supernatural forces out on the playing field. The ghosts were everywhere for Sam Darnold, but you think about what he had to overcome, not only being shipped out and moved to different cities, but the head coaches and the coaching staffs that he dealt with were horrific. He went from Adam Gase to, I didn't even stat this out, but I'm just I know Frank Reich was in there at one point. There just a number of, I'm going to go ahead and look this up before we finish, but Sam Darnold's head coaches run out has been horrific. He's finally with one of the best and head coaches in the league and a candidate for coach of the year, although he's probably not going to win it after that week 17 drubbing. But yeah, Sam Darnold for me, just outside of week 18, outside of that week 18 kind of flop against the Lions has been phenomenal. He finishes the QB 9. I can't say enough good things about this guy because he was free. I picked him up in a ton of dynasty leagues in the offseason, a la Jonnu Smith, right before the season started. You can pick him up in redraft. Sam Darnold absolutely crushed it for you, and he was a waiver wire gem as well.
100%. I had such disdain for the player that Sam Darnold had been up to this point in his career. So I was like, this guy is bad. I am not betting on him at all. It turns out situation and one of the top 5 head coaches of the NFL play callers really works in your favor. If you look back what he had with the Jets and with the Carolina Panthers under the Matt Rule situation, it was abysmal. No surprise. And even in college, he's been turnover prone back to his days at USC. That was always kind of an issue for him. What Minnesota did is they found a way to highlight his strengths, which is what he can do. He can get the ball wherever he needs to throw because he has good arm strength and he can make plays and read. And then they also eliminated his turnovers and his mistakes that he makes, kind of the boneheaded mistakes where you see the Will Levis mean, you expect Sam Darnold to do that once or twice. Kevin O'Connell did a fantastic job of making the best version of Sam Darnold we've seen. So it really comes down to what they do with him in the offseason, if they sign him in a contract, which entirely possible because of JJ stuff. So we could be running this back for a couple more years with Sam Darnold, where he's, we'll see how it goes. I think it really comes down to this playoff run. But yeah, Sam Darnold was awesome. Top 11 in points per game. Like, he was everything you could have wanted. And he was a waiver wire ad through multiple points of the season, because a lot of people in 1 QB leagues, you don't need to pick up quarterbacks, right? Unless you have a bust. So if you had Anthony Richardson, maybe you picked him up and you're loving life because he did everything you could do. So yeah, Sam Darnold's awesome. I was torn on these two. I wasn't sure which way to go. I like Sam Darnold just because I was betting on the comeback from being such a bad player to being a good NFL quarterback. If we want to take the injury concern, it's kind of Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow had the wrist thing. But I don't think you can go wrong with either one of these guys. So that's where I had a real hard time choosing. So my vote was Sam Darnold, but you could go either way with these two.
No, I think Jerry brought up a good point where the irrelevancy, I mean, even Jamie says, he wasn't really relevant before that. Yeah. I think that's what makes him a fantastic comeback player. I did go Joe Burrow because of the year he had. There was talks about his wrist. He's not going to be able to throw the same. And then what did he do? He went out there and had the career best in passing yards, right? We mentioned it earlier, over 4,900. He had a career best in passing TDs with 43, 9 interceptions. Just went out there and really showcased why he is Joe, ice cold, ice in his veins type of player, is because he is that dominant. And even though missing 10 games, it shows what he is to the team itself. Like Darnold, in a sense, where if JJM was there, you could probably plug him in and make it happen because of Kevin O'Connell, right? Darnold or Burrow, I think, makes that team where we saw it last year. Burrow isn't there. It's not the greatest team. You have Burrow in the backfield, though. He's going to sling it. He's going to go ahead and make the things happen. This was one of the ones that we were the only one split on the whole thing here. So this was a huge one where we went 2-2. So we actually let the people decide on this one, on who would actually be the full. And it was a close race overall. Let me pull it up. Just went away. Hold on here. It was a close race overall, with the winner winning by 63%, I think I saw, to 37%. So very about 2/3 of the way. And that is the one and only comeback player of the year, Sam Darnold. And as we saw, ADP QB 38, finished at QB 8 overall, 66.2% completion, 4,319 yards, 35 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. I mean, he really rejuvenated his career, kind of like what we saw in Geno Smith a couple years ago, right? Maybe get a couple years out of Sam Darnold now, because he's in a system that knows how to use his strengths, knows how to benefit from him. And really, as any NFL player, that's all you really want, is someone that trusts you and says, hey, we know how to make you work miracles. Let's go ahead and make it happen. People see it. Any thoughts on this?
I just need to send a plea out to the people. If Sam Darnold leaves Minnesota, please sell him in Dynasty. Do not be fooled. This is a Kevin O'Connell situation. This is a Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and a weapon situation. Darnold is, I think, better. And Darnold, I think, has a career ahead of him. And Darnold will get the bag if he leaves. Don't be fooled. Use that. Sell the crap out of Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold stays in Minnesota, hold his ass, right? I'm holding him. He's got a perfect situation, coaching staff, scheme, weapons around him, and they can build and make him even better than this, which is, QB 9. It's possible for Sam Darnold to get up to that QB 7-6 range if he stays in Minnesota, in my estimation. So just be careful. Pay attention to what happens with Sam Darnold this offseason.
Do you think, I might put you on the spot here, is there a team, though, where it's like if he gets traded to or goes somewhere because he gets the bag or anything, where you're like, okay, I can trust it for this season too? It's very hard to think of it, because you talk about O'Connell, you talk about the weapons. Minnesota, we were saying Minnesota was set up for success when they drafted JJM. Like, he was going however on rookie drafts, because this is a great fit. He's going to beat out Sam Darnold. Very well could have, but then he got hurt. But now there's talks on teams are reaching out to say, hey, is JJM available? For those that don't know, JJ McCarthy, the quarterback rookie that they drafted 11th overall, 10th overall, I think. That guy, though, where they, maybe 12. Both Knicks with 12. I know that one. Both Knicks with 12. But with that, is there a team that you would consider, okay, keeping him, or do you even think that they trade JJM, or is there more chance they trade Darnold?
I don't know. We'll have to see what he does in the playoffs. I think that's really going to determine it. Can Sam Darnold win in the playoffs? I think probably not. When it comes down to it, you want somebody better. But is Sam Darnold better than JJ McCarthy next season? And I think the answer is yes for this team. So does Minnesota want to kind of keep the core together and try and run it back and be a little bit better? It's possible. But if Sam Darnold flames out again, I mean, week 18 was basically a playoff game. So if he flames out again now in the playoffs in a meaningful game, there's going to be a lot of questions. So, should Minnesota keep him? I don't know the answer to that, but I'll say, where's Sam Darnold going to go that you're going to be happy about him? New York Giants? No. Las Vegas Raiders? No. I mean, there's weapons there for sure. But the staff is unproven. The situation is poor, and Sam Darnold cannot do it on his own. He needs an elite play caller like Kevin O'Connell.
Sure.
Yeah, there's some concerning underlying metrics with Darnold. Like his off target percent was pretty high. His turnover worthy throw rate's pretty high. So you could say there was a good amount of luck involved in keeping the turnovers and things down. So it might be a little bit more rocky with Sam Darnold. I think this is kind of the best we're going to get one way or the other. Even if he stays in Minnesota, I think might come down a little bit. But yeah, these are just awesome numbers. Like when you look at a baseline stat, QB8, over 4,000 yards passing, 35 touchdowns, 12 receptions. That's ideal. Like that's what you want. With so many quarterbacks struggling, and Sam Darnold stepped up, and he was everything you could have asked for. So, yeah, and it makes sense why he's a comeback player of the year. I like Jamie's suggestion about Dobbins. I thought about using him, but he kind of got injured and really wasn't there the entire season for you. Yeah. So, that was kind of my issue with him. So, if he would have stayed healthy the entire year, yeah, I probably would have picked Dobbins. But that's why I voted for Darnold, because he took over. This Vikings team had a ton of injuries. They lost a player in the offseason, he died. They had their starting quarterback go out for the year. Darnold comes in. They lost their tackle. They had a bunch of stuff happen this offseason, and they just put up one of the best seasons in franchise history with Darnold at the reign. So, it's a really remarkable season for the Vikings. They should be very proud of it.
With Darnold too, there was possibly 2 weeks where you could have probably bought low on him. When he played the Jets in week 5, had below 3 fantasy points. When he played the Jacksonville in week 10, had below 4 fantasy points. Possibly bought low on him, but then after that, he didn't have a game with less than double digits, unless you play in week 18. Hopefully you don't, because that's not great. Brutal. But that's it. And to Jerry's point, for them to win, there's 2 teams they have to get by, because I think they're the 3rd best team, and that's the Ravens and the Lions. If they get by them, they can definitely be the Super Bowl. I think they're the 3rd best all around. They have the weapons there, but it does come down to the big moments. I could bring Oregon into it. Dylan Gabriel in the champion or the playoffs, right? Big moments. That's where he really crashes, and guess what he did? So Darnold, don't crash. This is really money-making year for you, right? Go out there and make it, but also show it. I think really just a conference championship may keep him there. I don't think he has to win a Super Bowl, but Super Bowl guarantees Minnesota's going to do everything they can with him, because NFC championship, it may be all right, what's the best offer we can get for him to make it move? So.
Right. And here's the thing with Darnold too, he's had a lot of insecurity in his career, bouncing around. Nobody wanted him. Situation with coaches that we mentioned earlier. This is a place like a Baker Mayfield that will offer him a ton of security from his angle. So I don't think Darnold's going to go out and take the highest offer. I think if Minnesota is willing to make him a reasonable, good offer, I think he's going to take it. I think he's going to stay. And, a Baker Mayfield, slightly less than a Baker Mayfield contract, will do it for him. Keep him around in Minnesota.
Yeah, not everywhere you're going to get Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson type of lineup. Then you bring in Aaron Jones, they probably get a running back in the draft, So I agree with you. It'd be smart if he does, but money talks, unfortunately. So
and 7 years in the league, Sam Darnold is 27 years old.
Give me him.
A lot of hope. And this goes out to, not to get off topic here, but Bryce Young, right, the development matters, right? Mm-hmm. So this is someone that actually trusts him, said, hey, built that confidence back up and said, hey, you're our guy, go out there and do it, right? And guess what? He did. So I think O'Connell is one of those smart coaches where even if JJM comes back, he's not necessarily going to transition over. They'll compete, but he might have Darnold go in and just let Darnold know, but if you start messing up, you don't have that year last year, we have this guy coming in here as well. But for every good player, for every comeback player, there's always a bust candidate. And we're not saying you're horrible, but you were this season, unfortunately. You're probably a phenomenal person, great person, all that kind of stuff. But this season for our fantasy teams, you just didn't do what we needed to do. So our bust of the year nominees are CJ Stroud, Kyle Pitts, he's probably been on there the past 3 seasons. Dalton Kincaid and Jalen Waddle. But as on these guys specifically, Jesse, who's your bust of the year candidate?
It's none other than Mr. Jalen Waddle. My goodness, how the good times have just gone to shit. I don't know what happened to Jalen Waddle, but he disappeared. Like legit was drafted insanely high. He was a top 40 pick in redraft. Do you know what he finished as wide receiver wise? It was abysmal, folks. Let me tell you. He's the wide receiver 46, 9.4 points per game. And you're thinking, oh, maybe he was inefficient. Nah, his expected fantasy points per game at the wide receiver position is 70th. The guy was just a non-factor. Lost out to Jonnu Smith. Saw less targets than freaking Devon Achane. Like the target share percentage. So like it all went away from Jalen Waddle. I don't know what McDaniel and his offense were doing, but Jalen Waddle went the Kyle Pitts route. So it's kind of funny that they're in unison out to up and to below each other because these two guys were like fades out of their offenses and they were just not a fun part to have. If you had Waddle, you could not start him. He was just what you call a roster clogger, just taking up bench spots, consistently sitting there hoping. And this is the problem with the Kyle Pitts and the Jalen Waddles. People have the hope, so they continue to hold on to them. Should have just dropped Waddle, let someone else deal with it, but he has such name cachet. He was killing you because people were wanting to throw him back in lineups. And then he had like one blow-up game. I can't remember what week it was. It was week 12, and everybody, oh, he's back. And then it's like, not so much because he goes 11, has a good week in week 14. Week 15 puts up a bagel in the first week of the playoffs. So he really just kills you on top of it, too, if you played him in your fantasy playoffs, which I don't know how many teams did, but there were a couple of teams. So overall, like, Waddle just nuked your season. So he is my vote. I think all of these guys are very deserving, and we'll get to the guy that the other people like. But yeah, Waddle's my choice.
Jesse, what about you?
Yeah, I can't go with Jalen Waddle because there's another guy who I have to absolutely put in this category, and he's been there 3 years in a row for good reason. It's Kyle Pitts. Holy crap. We were back in on Kyle Pitts. Kirk Cousins was coming, the second coming in Atlanta, and he was going to do things, and this was one of the best fantasy schedules in the league for, in the offseason. In week 3, in week 5 for the fantasy playoffs. Atlanta had the best run out. They had a mediocre defense. This was supposed to be the Kyle Pitts season. You know what? Drake London finished wide receiver 5, and Kyle Pitts was nowhere to be seen. Darnell Mooney, if he didn't get injured, I think would have been a top 15 wide receiver. Not sure where he finished, but pretty close to that. I think he was probably top 20, certainly top 25. But yeah, the fact that Ray McLeod was earning more work and targets than Kyle Pitts is absolutely ridiculous. Only 63% snap share for Kyle Pitts this season. We know that he's not an inline blocker, so that makes sense. That's not concerning. What is concerning for Kyle Pitts is the 7.7 fantasy points per game. He finishes as a tight end 15, but any guess fantasy points per game amongst all pass catchers, where that finished number-wise amongst all pass catchers?
For Kyle Pitts?
Yeah.
I mean, he's hanging out with freaking Dalton Kincaid and just the business down building drums. Outside top 100. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll say outside top 100.
Yeah, really close. 95th overall in fantasy points per game. That's not where you want. Dalton Kincaid, better in fantasy points per game. Isaiah Likely, better in fantasy points per game. Kayshon Boutte, better in fantasy points per game. So we're really getting down and dirty with Kyle Pitts, and we always have. But you know what? Michael Penix is going to be the starter next year, and we're going to have to talk up Kyle Pitts next year. I don't think I can draft him anymore, but guess what? I was finally out on Jerry Jeudy. I was finally out on Jameson Williams. These guys can come back. The talent is there. These guys can come back. It's just Kyle Pitts is going to be the ultimate, steel brass cojones pick if you're able to pick him next year. Yes. I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, the funny thing is at this point in time in his career, Travis Kelce had yet to have a catch. So just for people that want to know like how crazy Travis Kelce's career is, it started after this season. Like basically this is when he took off. So I don't know. Maybe Kyle Pitts just had a really abysmal 3 straight years. Yeah, he's not old at all. That's the thing. Yeah. So people are like, oh yeah, he's entering his prime. It's great. I'm like, bro, and we're talking about it right now. I'll probably draft him late as a flyer and just hope it works out. But then I'll just drop him like week 4. That's how it's gonna go.
The not so great thing about Kyle Pitts is that name value, as I always bring up, right? Like he's someone that does have a name, so you probably can't sell him for what you want, and you probably can't buy him for what you want either. Like you can't, they're not going to sell low on him. You're not going to buy him for high, right? So you have to you're probably comfortable just sticking with him and saying, all right, this is what I got to roll with, right? Or he's a throw-in package. Be like, well, I'll also throw in Kyle Pitts here. Me and Jamie on the same wavelength here, though. I'm going to go with our guy Kincaid here. Multiple reasons. I mean, before I talk about Kincaid, players that finished above him at tight end, Taysom Hill, who also played only 8 games, Jake Ferguson, Foster Moreau, Noah Fant, Austin Hooper, Will Disley, Okungwo, Noah Gray, Dalton Kincaid. Yes, I know he played in 13 games here, but it just has this was supposed to be the year. Like when we first started the season, who were the pass catchers for Buffalo? Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, not household names. Kincaid was the guy. Again, going tight end 3. Finished as he said tight end 26 in full PPR, tight end 30. Just a abysmal year for Kincaid. It didn't seem like he was really part of the offense. There was a stretch where he was getting over 6 targets per game, but even in that, only 2 games came over 5 receptions in that, week 4 through week 9. His biggest game was 6 receptions, 51 yards, no touchdowns. Like he's not doing those great things. It's just hard to say it because I took him in a lot of leagues. Some people took him as tight end 1. Again, we talk about places like Bowers too, where there was no one else, and yet he still did not make that factor. Especially when you watch him in college, you're like, oh, this could be a awesome weapon for them. They're gonna make moves, and it just wasn't happening for him. Yeah. He became this huge bust for me. I was dissatisfied for him, so it became a huge thing for him there with that. Just horrible for him.
Yeah, he was rough, man.
CJ Stroud, I know, is our other guy, and this was someone that Aaron picked on as well. I mean, another just a abysmal type of year. I mean, you took him early as well, your top. I know I had him as like a dynasty QB1, and he's still high in my ranks, but this was just a huge sophomore slump for him. When it comes to it, our fan favorites here for bust of the year, Stroud actually did win 41%. Then it was Kincaid at 24%. Then Kyle Pitts at 23%, and Waldo at 12%. And a fantasy football universal award for bust of the year goes down to, unfortunately, it's our quarterback, CJ Stroud. I feel like Terrell Owens here crying about it, but his ADP was QB3. Fitz is QB18 overall, 62.7% completion, 3,677 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Excuse me. That really comes down to it because we just talked about Sam Darnold, who had 16 more touchdowns to him and the same amount of interceptions. Plus, Darnold also had more passing yards. So it just wasn't there for him. I mean, do y'all disagree with this? I mean, CJ Stroud just was a big bust.
He was a bit like the QB 18 is doing a lot of pulling him up. He was QB 31 in points per game. Like he was abysmal. Here's some names that were better than him this year: Daniel Jones on a points per game basis, Tanner McKee, Marcus Mariota. These guys nobody gives a flying what about. Were better than when they started than CJ Stroud. He was right there with Kirk Cousins. The difference is you paid premium prices for CJ Stroud this year because how good he was as a rookie. I think the problem a lot of people had with CJ Stroud is we overinflated his production his rookie year because he was a back-end QB1. He was really good, but people were expecting a massive jump for him to be like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning in those elite years. So this is the year we were all in on the Texans offense. If you remember, they had Tank Dell coming back. They had Stephon Diggs. They had, Nico Collins. Everything was working out. They get Joe Mixon. Everyone's like, oh, this could be one of their offenses in the league. And it just did not work out. Like the entire year you were chasing with them. So yeah, Stroud, I didn't like his draft position at the beginning of the year. I was saying, like, do not draft him at this cost. This is one of the things I got right this year, so I'm gonna brag about that. A lot of things we got wrong, but this one I got right. So, yeah, he was abysmal. And if you had him, he killed you from a value perspective and production wise. So it's rough.
Yeah, and one takeaway I'm going to have for these quarterbacks next season, I want to see where running back go. I'm not sure we have the same free agent class, but we have a massive incoming rookie class. And wherever these running backs go, you talked about Joe Mixon. He's really the guy who nuked CJ Stroud's value. We saw Josh Jacobs absolutely nuke Jordan Love's value. If these quarterbacks do not run, they're going to have a problem keeping up that fantasy production when they're giving the ball over a ton. Matt Stafford, not like anyone was was putting a bunch of faith in him for fantasy this year. But another example, good quarterbacks, but these running backs who can, who are workhorses, who get the ball around the goal line, they're absolutely going to tank your value. And among other things, that's what happened to CJ Stroud as well this season.
Jamie brought up a good question. He said, I think Richardson is more a bust than Stroud. He was drafted higher too. I think Richardson, though, there was hope for the rushing upside, and he did perform in certain situations where that was. We knew that wasn't necessarily happening with Stroud. And yeah, Nico Collins being hurt, Diggs being hurt, Dell, those weapons are around him. Richardson, if anyone watched him, I don't think you're expecting him to pass for over 300 yards a game. It was like we wanted that strong arm to do a long pass and get Michael Pittman for a touchdown, or he's rushing in himself, which hurts, Jonathan Taylor. So for Stroud, I just feel there was more expectation for a better passing career or season, and it just didn't happen for us. So I think that's where the bust of the year came in.
They went back to back in ADP. Stroud was overall 51, Richardson was 52, so they were like right there. And I think the difference really is like Richardson dealt with injuries. He was consistently in and out of lineups this season, so that's kind of where I'm giving him the pass. But even like when he played, he was 3 points per game better than CJ Stroud. So it's like it's like he was as bad as you could get where you're taking quarterback that early.
Yeah.
Just rough.
But with that, it is a season-long game. Fantasy, if you're in Dynasty, it's a year-long game, right? But with that season, there are key moments in the season where we need just a strong performance, or we're banking on these guys to go out there and win. Maybe that's the playoffs. Maybe it's week 13 or week 12 where you have to beat this guy because he's in your division and you need to get that one up. So our next award actually is the best single game performance, and our nominees are Jamar Chase in week 10, Jonathan Taylor in week 16, Amon-Ra St. Brown in week 11, or Baker Mayfield in week 17. Jesse, let's start with you. Who is your candidate for best single game performance?
I mean, it might sound like we're going with the same guy again, but we are. It's Jamar Chase. He's the only guy with multiple 40-point games this week. So when I submitted him for the bid, I said, oh, yeah, by the way, he had multiple of these games. Yeah. So he not only did it once, he did it twice. But, yeah, he was just, for me, Jamar Chase single-handedly won you multiple weeks this season, which is what the differentiator is. So I'm kind of cheating where it's single-game performance, but I'm using multiple. But, yeah, his week 10 was a freaking monster performance. One of the best games we've ever seen. Like, we were watching that game go with him, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. It's not going to stop. When's it going to end? And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to keep cooking. It's 44 points in standard, 55 in PPR. Like, it's just everything you could have asked for a player to do that game. Like, I think that was a Monday night game too. And it was just the island game. You watch that, you're just like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, Jamar Chase is my vote for the best game of the year, because that was just the one I enjoyed watching the most personally.
Jerry, what about you?
Yeah, I had to go with Jonathan Taylor because basically he did nothing up until that point. I mean, he had a few games where, 1, 2 games prior to his week 16 game where he finished as an RB1, 2 or 3 more games where he was just outside of that top 15 running back. But in week 16, 29 carries, 218 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did nothing through the air, and it didn't matter. He was far and away the RB1. 39.8 half PPR fantasy points for Jonathan Taylor in week 16. And oh yeah, he absolutely crushed your opponents in the fantasy semifinals. And you know what? He did it again in week 17. So I know we're just talking about 1 week here, but Jonathan Taylor putting up 3 touchdowns to get you to your fantasy championship. Absolute stud league performance.
Yeah, 100%. JT and Chase, both great assets to have. In any given week, they can go off. And I think those weeks y'all speak of is a testament to it. I had to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown in week 11. It was more on the, oh, wow. I mean, he was the wide receiver 1 that week, but 11 targets, 11 receptions. So he had 100% catch rate that game. Jared Goff just needed to throw it to him, and this guy was catching it. 161 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver 1 overall, as I mentioned, 38.7 fantasy points that week. Just a phenomenal performance for him. And you don't see that often, where a guy just has more than 10 targets and yet has 100% completion percentage when targeted as well. Our other guy here, Baker Mayfield. You talk about the championship performance. If you have Baker, I mean, this guy honestly could have been just like comeback player just because of the year he had. But I mean, phenomenal. 5 touchdowns, 359 passing yards, 2 yards on the ground too, if you want to accept that as 0.2, so it could have made the difference for you. But great season for him as well. A great week, especially when we talk about championship. That could easily be the one that matters, right? The best single game, like the one that won me everything, right? So he could definitely be argued as the best single game performance. But the fans voted. They said Jamar Chase, week 10 is the winner, 71%. Then it was Jonathan Taylor, week 16, 18%. Then Baker, week 17 with 8%. And then Amon-Ra with 3%. And the Fantasy Football Universe Award for best single game performance, though, goes to none other than Jamar Chase. Best single game performance. Jesse, I know this was your guy. You want to talk more about just this stat line that he put up that week?
I mean, it's just a ridiculous number. He was just cooking the Ravens. I'm pretty sure it was the Ravens. I might be misremembering this game. But yeah, he was going against one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, and they were like, yeah, let's just put him single up and see how that goes. Yeah, bad idea. Don't ever do that to Jamar Chase because he's basically the guy Freddy Krueger in Nightmares. He's just going to consistently just burn you in light the entire time. Yeah. So, yeah, everything you could have asked for in this game. If you want to go watch just elite performance with him and Joe Burrow. By the way, I'm going to talk about Joe Burrow for a second. There was a week 17, Joe Burrow scored more points than Baker Mayfield, and there was a team in one of my leagues that they had Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow, and they put up 100 points between those two guys. It was oh yeah, so those two guys were just ridiculous. But yes, very deserving. All these guys are deserving in my opinion. But yeah, Jamar Chase, the king of the hill.
I do highlight because I talked about Amon-Ra, who in week 11 had 11 receptions, 161 yards, 2 TDs. Jamar Chase, same amount of receptions, 103 more yards, and 1 extra TD. Just goes to show what kind of player he is, dominant. And I mean, yeah, he's just, it's really an argument on who is the wide receiver one. I feel like when you talk about Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, and I think right now, Jamar Chase really said, "Hey, step away, big bro. It's my turn." So
yeah.
And honestly, in a couple of years, you might be saying the same thing about Malik Neighbors to Jamar Chase, or Brian Thomas. So, unfortunately, for all the guys that lift us up, there's some guys that bring us down. And as you see it, the worst single game performance of the year. These are guys that hopefully it didn't impact you, but if it did, I mean, here we are. And our nominees are going to be Terry McLaurin in championship week 17. Jackson Smith-Njigba, championship week 17. Cooper Kupp in the playoffs. I know we're talking about single game, but that was the bid in there. Just in the playoffs, he choked the whole team. So, and then Calvin Ridley, week 6, another one. Jeremy, who's your guy here?
What the hell, JSN? What the hell was that? 7 games in a row. JSN absolutely went off for your team, and especially after that bye, the last 6 games since the week 10 bye for Seattle, he was crushing wide receiver 12, 11, 34, 15, 23, and 7, those 2 down games, simply because he did not find the end zone. But JSN had a phenomenal run out the second half of the season. And then what did he do against Chicago with, yes, a good secondary, but a defense that faltered for time to time during the season? You expected Seattle, who was still in the playoff hunt at the time, to go out and absolutely crush. They did win that game, but barely. I think the score was 6-3, Jesse, if I'm not mistaken.
It was ugly.
And JSN finished week 17, wide receiver 67, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 32 yards, no scores, 4.7 half PPR points for you. One of the biggest letdowns of the season for me, maybe because I have a ton of JSN, is that week 17 letdown. I will relive that week 17 over and over again in my nightmares. Thank you, JSN.
This is rough here. Championship week, Victoria, Jason, and Cup. Hey, man, I'm sorry. Happens to the best.
Nightmare fuel. That is nightmare fuel. You're like, no.
Jesse, what about you? Who's your candidate here?
That's a good transition because we're going to talk about McLaurin. You think the JSN performance was bad? How about going into week 17? Terry McLaurin is the wide receiver. I think he's wide receiver 12 to 16 points per game. He decides to go, hey, guys, you know what? I'm going to take the week off. 1 reception for 5 yards. 1.5 points, baby. Well done, Terry. I just got to give you a standing ovation. People are loving that. He was carrying
7
you.
targets.
And then he's like, I'm going on a boat with OBJ to Miami. We're just going to go have fun this week. So, yeah, it's the nightmare fuel game for you. And because he was started everywhere, he was not benched. That's the problem with him. And so Calvin Ridley's a little bit more iffy with it, because of his roster reception and all that stuff. Terry McLaurin was an auto start guy in your lineup because he was a top 12 wide receiver. And then he just throws an absolute dud and nukes your team. So, yeah, that one, watching it, I was like, it can't get any worse for him. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. He thought it was going to get better. Just nope. Yeah, one of the worst performances I've ever seen. There was a couple other guys in week 17, but yeah, Terry McLaurin takes the cake for me.
Fair. Yeah, you probably did right into the championship week. As I mentioned, someone traded it for him, and I was so thankful that he had that kind of performance because, so you get man trying to make that move like that. There you go.
Right.
My candidate is Calvin Ridley, so I will talk about that, but I will hit on Cooper Kupp first because the playoffs. This was Aaron's guy here. I know we said single game, but the reason why he's saying the playoffs because all season, he missed 4 games. All season, he did not have 1 game with under 6 targets. Not one. In the playoffs, every single game, not 1 game over 3 targets. In week 15, 3 targets, no receptions. Week 16, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 24 yards. Week 17, 3 targets, 1 reception, 29 yards. He just completely disappeared from you. He did not do anything for you. It was just horrible to see him on the field. And if you got it there, I mean, like we said, our guy here that had him, it was just a horrible performance, from Cup, So we apologize for that mix up that you had there, because chances are if we had that lineup, we're starting all those guys too. So you're not alone.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a bad performance to him. Jamie, I lost champs because Jason and Mixon. I think a lot of people are in the same boat,
Yeah.
So
Mixon was the RB50 in playoffs for folks. Like, that is just brutal. Being a locked in top 6 guy, and then he's like, oh, guess what? I'm taking him. Yeah. So he killed you too. Like, both of those guys.
Yeah. The player I was talking about was Calvin Ridley, and this is really, again, just based on performance. Yes, it wasn't in championship week, so I get why those are candidates. But Calvin Ridley in week 6, 8 receptions or 8 targets, 0 receptions. In my modern day, with games fast football, I can't remember a time when someone had 8 targets and absolutely no receptions. Luckily, he had 0.9 points because he did get 1 carry for 9 yards, but that is it for that week. Just a horrible performance. Doesn't matter where he finished on the season. Just if you had him, you probably start him, and if you start him, that is just. I'm more disappointed seeing, like, bro, if you're gonna put up that kind of stat line, just don't get targets. Like, why are you throwing it? But he had 8 targets and no receptions. Like, come on, bro. I know you're better than that, man. This is our come on, man take segment, right? Where it's just like, come on, man. But it just didn't happen.
Look, I think everyone here at the FFU learned a valuable lesson. If they would have listened to me, they wouldn't have drafted Calvin Ridley. Even last year, I've been for years saying that Calvin Ridley you should not touch him. He's been terrible. Just horrific stuff from Calvin Ridley. But I did not touch him much this year. That's for sure. Last year, different story.
For the fans, I will say for the single game performance, I did put Cooper Kupp as just week 15 because that was his worst week in the playoffs. So that one did win 49%. Cooper Kupp week 15. Would it have been different with the full playoffs potentially, but that one did win for that specific week. Terry McLaurin came in 2 at 31%. Jackson Smith and Jigba at 14%, and then Calvin Ridley was 6%. But the FFU only has 1 award, and worst single game performance of the year is none other than Terry McLaurin. I mean,
well done.
Yeah.
So just bravo. It's success, brother. We love it. We love it.
I think too is like we know him as like a guy that can stretch the field. 5 yards on 1 reception, like we know you can get 20 plus yards, right? So that goes into a big part too, where it's just, man, that's tough, especially because it was championship week. That's rough way. Still good. I don't think you could buy him. Maybe you can. Maybe a guy got pissed and you go buy him. So go ahead and go do that. Our next award, we have 3 more left here. The next one, though, is going to be, yes, the Rookie of the Year. Which rookie came in and just dominated? Now, there are some rookies on here that had great seasons that are not some of our top 4 candidates. Doesn't mean they had a great year. These were just guys that we said, hey, they really went above and beyond, and they're someone that we want to consider. The nominees are for Rookie of the Year. We have Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, Bucky Irvin. Jeremy, let's start with your guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to talk too much more about him here, but it's Brian Thomas Jr. I love all of these guys. I mean, Jaden Daniels was an absolute force, but BTJ was just the guy who was kind of worth it. At the end of the day, when he was, I think through week 17, I believe it changed because of week 18, but he was the wide receiver 4 on the season, absolutely doing special things. Was Brian Thomas Jr. always open. And it didn't matter the quarterback. That's the thing. You could say a similar thing about Malik Neighbors, but with Brian Thomas Jr., he was producing at such a high level with Mac Jones. What the hell, with a lame duck head coach in Doug Peterson, who I believe has been fired now. If not, it's happening. Yeah, I think he's gone. So, and Trevor Lawrence, of course, not being a shell of who he was supposed to be. So I really think Brian Thomas Jr. here is the Rookie of the Year. He was just an absolute stud. And, Jamie brings up Brock Bowers here in the chat. No Brock Bowers on the list, but, Brian Thomas Jr. was, behind Brock Bowers. So for me, value matters. And that's why I'm choosing BTJ.
Good. Just what your
There's
thoughts?
only 4 guys can make this list. And it's as much as I liked Brock Bowers, like Malik Neighbors was exceptional, Brian Thomas Jr. was exceptional,
Mhm.
Bucky Irving was exceptional, but no rookie was more acceptable to me than Jaden Daniels. It's why he's going to win Rookie of the Year, obviously, because he plays quarterback. But if you look at WAR, I think he's 12th in fantasy WAR overall. Like, that's just no, excuse me, he's 17th overall, 3.35. He beats everyone else on this list. What he did, he was 6th in points per game for quarterbacks. He was awesome. He was what we were hoping Caleb Williams would be. It's just the rushing floor each week in and week out, and he went nuclear. He did it for you. So Jaden Daniels likely carried you to a championship because he was so cheap where you got him similar to Brian Thomas Jr. And he was the exceptional the entire season. Like there was an injury now and then, but every other week was just awesome from him. So yeah, this is why Jaden Daniels is the guy for me. And by the way, in the playoffs, 23 fantasy points, 36, 32. So like that's just a monster run through the playoffs, and that's why he's just the guy for me.
For sure. Yeah, when it comes to it too, I mean, I get it, Jaden Daniels, I think he might have broke the record for like Pepsi Rookie of the Weeks too when it comes to NFL as well. So fantastic candidate. To bring up Bowers, I think we knew Bowers was the tight end one of the class. Granted, tight end one overall, that could have made a difference. But for that matter, I chose Brian Thomas as well because in a lot of leagues, I got him, if not 201, back end of the first, 112, 111, where Bowers is going top 10, Neighbors top 10, Jaden top 10. Bucky, always why I'm arguing against him is because he has a system, as Jerry brought up, Brian Thomas, head coach, got fired. He played with a different quarterback. Bucky was in a nice system to make things happen consistently and just make it look great. Malik Neighbors, honorable mention, though. I mean, first 4 weeks, 3 of those 4 weeks, 18 targets, 12 targets, 15 targets, then 10 receptions, 8 receptions, 12 receptions, just dominant, consistently going in week out, just doing a dominant thing when he goes there. But when it comes to it, Brian Thomas, again, just the quarterback issues, what he had to go through as a wide receiver. There's questions about it. And honestly, he is the only constant in the team. There was a time where we were about to take Bigsby. Towards the end, Bigsby was relevant. Beginning of the season, we were about ETN, relevant. Kirk had a great season last year to come in and do good, got injured. Who was the one constant? Even Evan Ingram got hurt, right? The one constant was Brian Thomas Jr. down the stretch, did not have, from week 13 on, did not have one game with under 10 targets. So definitely just a great season for him. I thought he did phenomenal all the way through there. When it comes to the fans voting, Jaden Daniels did win this one. 67% said Jaden Daniels, 19% said Brian Thomas, 12% said Bucky Irvin, and then Malik Neighbors came in with 2%. But the FFU can only have one. So our only one and only is actually me and Jeremy. I guess we pulled Jeremy over though to the dark side, right? To finally say here, Rookie of the Year though, Brian Thomas Jr. 87 receptions, 133 targets, led all rookies in yardage with 1,282 yards. Not yardage, excuse me, but touchdowns with 10 touchdowns. Led all rookies there. So a phenomenal year from him. I think it goes to show as much as he's that stretch big field receiver, everything he did in LSU is just translating over, and whatever quarterback he has realizes, hey, this guy can win deep, and he can win deep consistently. So I think this is a phenomenal year from him. Any last minute thoughts on the Rookie of the Year?
No, I'm just atoning for my BTJ sins of the offseason here and picking him where I can. Absolute stud.
Yeah, like he's exceptional, man. Like the difference. Malik Neighbors was the better player throughout the season. Like he scored out points per game and all that fun stuff. But the difference in cost between these two guys was dramatic. Malik Neighbors was like round 3, round 4. Brian Thomas Jr. was pushing double digits. So like if you get that at the value added in, it's really hard to argue against Brian Thomas Jr. He was everything you could have asked for from a rookie, man. Just awesome.
Malik Neighbors, depending on what kind of league you're in, is probably a top 4 at least at the bare minimum pick, right? In rookie drafts. Thomas went back in, and granted, you're probably jumping loose around if you drafted Brian Thomas in the 112 instead of Marvin Harrison or even Caleb, for that matter, at 101, 103, kind of deal. So great year for him. 2 more here are our league winner. When we set the league winner here, this is the guy that really came through in the playoffs and dominated you. Just had a fantastic playoff run. So we're really focusing on the week 15, week 16, week 17. If you play in week 18, that's not ideal because a lot of people sit, so we don't talk about that. So week 15, week 16, week 17, the players are dominated. And the nominees are going to be Jahmyr Gibbs, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and Jaden Daniels. Jeremy, let's start with your guy. Who's your league winner?
Yeah, for me, it's Jaden Daniels. I mean, we talk about rookies. We talked about him just before in the Rookie of the Year conversation, and the reason is the back half of the year he really put it together. Like the front half, he was doing well, but I know we had a situation where in the beginning of the season, no rookie quarterback had thrown a touchdown through a couple of weeks, and then we were a little concerned about the slow starts of Bo Nix, Caleb Williams. And these guys, we're not so concerned now, and we're especially not concerned about Jaden Daniels. I mean, finishing as I believe it was the QB4 on the season, just amazing what he was able to do. But like you mentioned, the Commanders had a Week 14 bye, so perfect timing for your fantasy championship. Not perfect timing if you needed to make the playoffs with Jaden Daniels, but weeks 15 through 17. I asked Jesse this question the other day, SC. Do you want to take a guess at how many touchdown passes in weeks 15 through 17, so 3 weeks, Jaden Daniels threw in that time?
How many touchdown passes? I would feel
in 3
like
games.
6, 2
10.
each.
He
Jesus.
threw 10, 2, 5, and 3, 5 against those Philadelphia Eagles, who, that secondary has been much improved since they added the 2 rookies. But absolutely crushed QB7, QB1, and QB4 in standard quarterback scoring leagues over that stretch. He absolutely won you your fantasy championship. So Jaden Daniels for me is my league winner.
Yeah, he's awesome. He was the highest scoring player in the playoffs. Like, there's nobody that scored more points per game than him. 30.9. I want to give a shout out to Brian Thomas Jr. He did not make the list. He probably should have. He scored 28 points per game. He was basically on par with Baker Mayfield in scoring. So it was Brian Thomas and Jahmyr Gibbs. Why I voted for Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's RB1, 26.7 points per game. Really carried you. But all of these guys, you can make the case for any one of them. I don't think there's a bad answer at all. I had Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels carrying me in the Scott Fishbowl playoffs. So salute to you guys. You guys were carrying me the entire season. So you both get my kudos on that one. But yeah, I love Jaden Daniels. I think that's a really good pick. Jahmyr Gibbs was mine. But yeah, I kind of want to switch to Brian Thomas Jr. now that we're looking at stats. But I'll stick with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Nah, Gibbs a phenomenal one too, and Brian Thomas. I guess you did have Brian Thomas in some championship rosters, very well there for you. I chose Baker Mayfield. Him and Lamar Jackson had a similar outing when it comes to the quarterback play as far as points they scored. Baker, though, just starting, he was really a helpful league winner for you, but coming to the playoffs, week 15, 35 points, week 16, 24 points, week 17, the championship, 44.5 points. You talked about 10 touchdowns for Jaden Daniels in that span, Jeremy. Baker had 11 total touchdowns in that span as well. The difference between, Baker and Jaden and Lamar is he was just doing it through the air. Like, he's not doing it on the ground and rushing right as they can as well. So he's just trusted his wide receivers and getting the ball out there, just having great performances for them. So, I think they're phenomenal all around. What he can do is great, and it was awesome to see. And we talked about him earlier. It was with a guy in Jalen McMillan as his wide receiver too, right? To just go out there and dominate for him. Looking on these playoff league winners, Higgins almost 20 points week 15 and 16, then 40. Yep, that's a good one too. Go shut out on Burrow there. Overall league winners, Baker, since we drafted. Yep, no reason to.
Before we reveal this one, I know you mentioned Baker had one more touchdown pass. Any guess on Jaden Daniels' rushing yardage in weeks 15, 16, and 17?
No clue.
Total or average? Total.
Either.
150 maybe. I don't know.
Quick math, it looks like 275.
Jesus. Good God. There you go.
127 in week 17 alone.
Damn,
81 in week 16, 66 in week. So he's averaging close to looks like maybe 85 yards rushing per game in the fantasy
playoffs. There you go. He's definitely a dual threat. We talked about, or people talked about early on, no quarterback has really done the type of season he has since Lamar Jackson. Yeah. Lamar Jackson's a 2-time MVP, right? So chances are we might be seeing another one here. As always, the fans got to vote on this too. They actually said it was a close one, actually, with the winner at 39%, with Jahmyr Gibbs going to that one, and then it was Jaden Daniels at 23%, Lamar Jackson at 22%, Baker Mayfield at 16%, which leads us to the FFU League Winner Award, and it is one and only the non-quarterback Jahmyr Gibbs. Jesse, this is your guy. We'll let you talk about Jahmyr Gibbs and just his phenomenal stat line week 15 through 17.
Yeah, this doesn't even count as week 18. 46 fantasy points per game, which would boost him over 30 if you were counting that game. But yeah, he was just the do-it-all workhorse. As soon as I know everyone was concerned, they're like, oh, he's not a workhorse. Yeah, David Montgomery goes out, right? And Jahmyr Gibbs is like, I will siphon all the touches in this entire backfield. It was just phenomenal stuff. This was like peak CMC usage we were seeing out of Jahmyr Gibbs, showing you like, yeah, I'm that dude. And look at these points. Like, this is what I'm talking about. He was just everything you could have asked for, man. Like, the entire offense basically ran through him, and it helps when you have as good an offense as they do. They were just cooking the entire time. So, yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, everything you could have asked for, 26 points per game. In the playoffs, man, he was really just crushing it. So, like, he's going to get drafted in the eye. He might be the RB1 going in an extra. We'll see. Could be like a top 3 pick. So, if you have Jahmyr Gibbs, you have to be loving life from what he did for you in the playoffs.
I think he might be RB1 going into next year just because the age, right? Saquon's still like RB2, RB3, but because the age, I mean, what he's done, I mean, it's phenomenal. Even with Montgomery on the field, it's not like he does bad. He still does good. It's just now we see when Montgomery's not there, oh, snap, Jahmyr Gibbs is a solid guy here. But fantastic pick. I mean, fans were on with you, Jesse, there too. So, I mean, just great overall league winner for you, guy that dominated the last 3 weeks for you. Which leads us to the one we've all been waiting for, our final award. You hit it right there. Most valuable player, the MVP award. And the nominees are, again, we have 3 quarterbacks and 1 running back, but Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Saquon Barkley. Let's start with Jeremy. Who's your MVP here?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be any surprise. It's Lamar Jackson for me. It is the number 1 overall fantasy player. It is the man who scored 2.7 more fantasy points per game than quarterback 2 Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson had an absolute ridiculous statistical season. That's what translates to fantasy. And he did it for a large part without heavily utilizing Mark Andrews, without really having a number 1. I mean, Zay Flowers is a great wide receiver. Mark Andrews, of course, came back to life in the second half. Derrick Henry, though, was eating away at all of that passing work. And what did he do? He still went out and threw the most passing yards of his career. Highly efficient guy. And oh, yeah, Lamar Jackson, just another 915 yards on the ground in what was the 3rd fewest rushing attempts of his on any given season. So Lamar Jackson, absolutely crushing, highly efficient season, looked great doing it. And, you know, Lamar Jackson, for everything that we talked about, his other MVP seasons, this, even if it doesn't end up winning him the MVP, this will go down as his greatest season of all time. The fantasy MVP is Lamar Jackson.
Jesse, thoughts?
It's a shame Jamar Chase can't even get in here. I'm like, what are we doing, folks? He needs to get in the discussion at least. But yeah, Lamar Jackson is that guy. The single most fantasy points ever from a quarterback, Lamar Jackson. He beat his 2019 season. He beat the elite Mahomes season. This was the best season you've ever seen from a quarterback play. Lamar Jackson, 434 fantasy points, folks. Just incredible stuff that he did, man. Just everything you want. 5,000 overall, 5,000 plus yards. Like, he's that dude. And the odds did finally switch. He's probably going to win his 3rd MVP in real life. So well done. Everything you could have asked for. I think if Josh Allen, you know, week 18, they put him out there, did everything you could have made the case for him maybe, but like the fact he put up a 0 really just kind of just hurts him. So yeah, Lamar. And then I would say it's Lamar and Saquon are the top 2 for me.
Yeah, you talk about Saquon, you know, again, phenomenal year, over 2,000 rushing yards. Josh Allen also had a great year, you know, with the weapons he had. My candidate was Baker, just simply because of where you drafted him. QB 28, you know, potentially going in, and then he came out and just, you know, finished as a top 5 QB. So in a sense, you could have got Baker Mayfield, 2-3 rounds later than what you did Lamar Jackson. Single quarterback leagues, you're getting Baker Mayfield, you know, round 8, you know, round 10, where Lamar's going in the top 1-2 for you, especially in Superflex leagues. So you could have essentially built something around to have a potential Jahmyr Gibbs or Saquon with Baker. Just a phenomenal year from him, you know, one of his best years as well. You talk about Lamar having his career, was a career year for Baker, and he's showing that his kind of been a journeyman, and he finally found his spot, and it looks like they're going beyond. They're going through the universe with him to take it all the way up as well. Every single one of these guys are phenomenal. Jesse, I actually just saw you did have Jamar Chase on here, as I thought it was Barkley at first, but Chase, Triple Crown winner, another one there that can be it. Brock Bowers, I think, could be argued as one for his rookie performance. So these 4 guys just really stepped out of their way to continue to dominate with them. We know Allen, Lamar always dominate, but Lamar, in a sense, just superb. He is so where I feel Josh Allen is like, all right, this is consistent every year. Lamar, I feel, took it to a next step and saying, nah, this is my best year yet. And he just did some great things for him. As far as the fans, the fans voted for it for their MVP, 46% Lamar Jackson is the winner there. Then you had 25% with Saquon Barkley, then 21% with Josh Allen, and then you have Baker Mayfield with 8%. Let's see who the fantasy football universe voted for the winner here. It's only could be one MVP, and that is Lamar Jackson. I mean, we already hit on this for quarterback of the year, right? Just a great year for him. 45 total TDs, over 2,000 total yards, 6.58 yards per carry as a running back, 66% completion. I mean, remarkable season from him. He is your QB1. You're not trading him. You're not buying him. You just can't. I mean, he is someone that's great. I mean, I don't even think you could trade Josh Allen for him at this point. I think he just did a phenomenal year, and he's only getting better. That's the biggest thing. Like, he came in as a rushing quarterback. This year alone, we're seeing, oh, snap, this guy has an arm now. Like, he can do it now. We're 4,000 yards, right? So his elevation gets scarier. Like, he might be going down in yards for rushing. It's not his worst rushing yard season, but he might be going down, but his passing's going up, which if he becomes like a pocket passer that has the ability to be mobile, watch out. That could be dangerous for everyone. But, Lamar Jackson, MVP there for us. That wraps it up. I mean, did y'all want to say anything about any of those awards or any of those guys before we close it out here?
I just want to say to Jesse, I'm very angry that he won most of those awards over the people that I picked. So double F both of you, because it looks like I'm the big loser. But you know what? I'm also the worst dressed. So we're
man,
going
I'm in
here.
a team here. Don't feel bad.
I will say I am happy that it took us the full season for me and Jesse to pull Jeremy over and admit Brian Thomas is a fantastic rookie. Going with him for rookie of the year, just phenomenal. And I will say, just as we brought up worst single game performance, bust of the year, just because they're top guys this year, does not mean they will be next year. So we'll make sure to wrap it up again next year. But the fantasy football season is officially ending. From everyone at the FFU, I think we had a comment here. Ryan Saquon for MVP. Great pick there. I mean, he was one of the candidates here. Jamie did ask DC Deion Sanders is interested in Raiders coaching job. I did see that. Hey, I think if the opportunity comes for him to coach his son in the NFL, he will take that opportunity. I am not buying into he's staying at Colorado. If an opportunity comes for him to get the coaching job, he's taking it.
Yeah. Is Tom Brady going to give him the opportunity? I don't know. I also don't care. It'll be a storyline, but whatever. It is.
Yeah, we'll see. It's interesting with Brady and all that fun stuff. At least he's getting people in the building. They got an interview with Ben Johnson. Like, that's not happening without Brady. So shout out to him. Maybe they can turn that culture around because it's kind of a disaster in Vegas. So hopefully it gets better from here.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in all season there, Tron. What did that one say? That's what's gonna pull up.
Is it Calvin Ridley?
That's a troll word. Yeah, probably that's a good one. If off the top, I do.
That's like the biggest bust, whoever it is. I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I mean, you know who was the fantasy troll for me actually is Alec Pierce, the wide receiver 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. He had a great season. He kind of broke out in his own way. He was the leader in the NFL in average depth of target, which is not an easy feat. He was constantly going downfield, but when the ball was thrown up to him, he was catching it. The thing then about Alec Pierce is he was so boom bust. You could grab him off the waiver wire, but you had no clue when to start him, when he was going to go off. And he did it a couple weeks in a row. Then he disappeared for a couple of weeks. Then, there was injury. There was a quarterback change. It was just a mess in Indy. So for me, Alec Pierce makes a lot of sense. You would not start him on a train. You would not start him on a plane. Alec Pierce, ridiculous.
Oh, that's pretty good. I'll say Jerry Jeudy just because he tickled us a little bit in the middle of the season. We're like, ooh, elite. And then they're like, hey, here's a side of Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Enjoy this with your life, sucker. And you're like a week 18, just abysmal performance. So yeah, Jeudy was fun. But yeah, he played with our emotions quite a bit this year.
I mean, I'm up both of y'all, I feel like, because I know Jamie says his is Debo. Mine would probably be Marvin Harrison Jr. You drafted him so high. And granted, the question is predict week to week. You predicted each week that he's to go out there and be a wide receiver 1, and he wasn't. He was closer to like wide receiver 50 more weeks than not. So he was someone that, granted, you probably played him, but predicting it, you probably got it wrong every week, right? So, I mean, he was someone that there was probably someone on your bench that outscored him in certain weeks. However, you didn't start that person because it was Marvin Harrison Jr. So why are you going to bench him there? So that would be a good one to have for next year, Fantasy Troll Award there to see who we can think wins there. But
yeah, we can send him and Tank Dell to the troll cave and just hang out there because it was a miserable season for both those guys.
Right.
Honorable mention to Breece Hall. Yeah.
Rough. I'll try to buy him if you can.
Mm-hmm.
From everyone at the FFU, Jeremy, I think you're doing a mock draft coming up here. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll see. I think we might record it. I don't know if we're going to stream that one, but we'll see. Pay attention. We'll give you all the info. But yeah, we got a mock coming up.
There you go. I know he has the adjusted ranks. Make sure you're following that on X. He's doing those different things there as well. For everyone tuning in all season, and then even in the off season, appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We enjoy the interactions and having y'all guests, talk to us on the show as well. Season is just getting started for us Dynasty folk, right? The fantasy football season is over. Dynasty is year round. We're coming in here. Jamie, there you go. Love mocks, never too early. Exactly.
I'll drop it in the chat here, Jamie. Give me a second.
Awesome award show too. Thanks for tuning in, Jamie. And don't forget, let's bring it back up so everyone's seeing that you're doing your award show on Tuesday. Let me just go in. Be on Going for Two live. Make sure you're catching our guy Jamie's award show here. So he'll have that again, Going for Two live, on YouTube there as well. But from everyone at the FFU, phenomenal season. Congrats here. Join our mock if you're in the comments here. I don't know can they click on that? I don't see anything in the comments.
No, I don't know what's going on.
I tried sharing the sleeper link, but it's tough. You gotta copy paste it.
Oh wait, I got it. It's there.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to copy paste that one. Yep.
Beautiful. Well, JB, I mean, for everyone joining in, again, we appreciate y'all still doing shows. We're coming up with different things, help you win, help you dominate, during the offseason, how you can maneuver around your league mates to become the top seed. And hopefully you get the MVP or just a league winner on your team this upcoming offseason. And, be staying tuned because we'll be here for y'all. But until next time, we are the guys at the FFU.